Hey, and welcome to the Straight Up Show podcast. I am your host, Calvin, and I want to thank you for joining us today. Once again, I'm joined by my co-host and co-creator, Brandon. Lee's not with us on this episode, but Lee had a big part of joining us today and kind of giving us feedback for this episode. We kind of had some going back and forth about how we're going to do this episode, and there was a lot to study, a lot to learn, because the show is about Asian discrimination during COVID. And, Brandon thought one way, I thought one way, and Lee kind of was in the middle to kind of just break the ice and kind of just split the difference and kind of see both parts of it. And I think that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, is kind of seeing both parts of it. Because in the beginning, I didn't understand what was going on with Asians going through COVID-19. And I didn't know that there was so much hate being displayed and shown towards them. And Brandon, quickly, can you just tell us what was your view of choosing this topic for today?
So with a lot of the hate discrimination going against the Asian community, right now there's not a lot of help being given by the federal government. And we don't need this to be a repeat of, Muslims in 9/11, the Germans from World War One. And, just other situations where we've been hit with a critical enemy, and we found a scapegoat, which is a certain race community, to place our, negative feelings on. So the best way I've thought we could help with this situation is by, one, talking about it, and also learning about what feelings we are having mentally that we can think on before we start, just throwing ourselves at people and spitting in the face of the Asian community.
Right. And my thing is, I can't feel, it's hard for me to feel sympathetic because, I am African-American, you're African-American. And, I've been alive for a long time, and I used to be, neglectful, saying that, oh, this doesn't happen to me. But man, us as African Americans, I'm not trying to just say this is a competition, but man, we go through it a lot. So when you told me this, it was kind of hard for me to feel sympathetic for what they're going through right now, because this is something that people that look like me go through every single day. So, I mean, after I spoke to you and we kind of just went back and forth, I kind of now see what you and Lee were talking about. So even just talking to you two who aren't Asian, I kind of now see the bigger picture. And I miss a lot of stuff that I didn't understand about discrimination itself, and selfishly thinking that it's just not really selfishly, but just saying that, okay, what happens more to us than them? And so, well, it's kind of like, hey, welcome to the club. So get in the line and join the club. And after we're going to bring some guests on today. We have a mental health expert who's going to talk to us about the impact of not just those who are being discriminated, but those who are actually, figure out why people are doing this. And we're going to talk to her and want to pick her mind, kind of ask her questions about this. We also have someone who is a victim of Asian discrimination because of COVID. And I think that, Brandon, I mean, I have a lot of questions to ask her. I mean, I know you do too. So we're going to ask these hard questions. Thank you so much, Emma, for joining us today, for coming on the Straight Up Show podcast.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Okay. And we found Emma on Twitter, and we saw that she had a wonderful YouTube video just explaining about how Asians across the world are getting discriminated because of COVID-19. And particularly, Brandon had some questions, and I did too, to ask you. So, Emma, I'm going to give the floor to Brandon, and Brandon's going to talk to you a little bit, okay?
Sure.
Hey, Emma. So what was your life, like everyday life, everything you did, from the beginning of your day near the end? What was your life before COVID started?
Okay. Well, I'm graduating as a healthcare worker, in a few weeks. So I was in clinic, and I guess I've always been like kind of a sensitive person to racial issues and like other kinds of inequality. So even before this whole pandemic started, I would always notice when people would treat me differently because I'm Asian in clinic, especially as a minority. Like when I was doing a rotation in Miami at a prestigious eye hospital, some patients would like, actually one memorably, she would like stare at me and she'd be like, China. And it was just mind blowing because, you know, I work so hard to be in a position where I can care for people, and this is how many of them treat me. And then there's also more subtle ways, like people would be like, oh, where are you from? Like every single day I would get asked that. And I know it can be like a friendly question, but I just can't help but to feel like I was always treated a little bit differently for being the only Asian in the building. And this was all before the pandemic started.
Yeah, so kind of before the pandemic started, you already felt some way of, you were, of course, different from, the other students. But how about like on the outside of even the classroom, like when you would, take a walk, your life was there and those type of
I guess I feel like pretty at ease, especially in Canada. I guess maybe some parts in the US where I'm not used to being there, where there's like less than a 1% Asian population, then I might feel a little strange because I would get like more stares and stuff in like Florida, like Miami area, for example. But I don't know, like I never really felt that unsafe, but I think I'm just a person who like really pays attention to these kinds of inequalities. So, but even for me, like I never really felt that out of place, at least in Canada and most parts of the US.
So now let's get into the pandemic. Now that the pandemic is here, how have your life changed since then?
Okay, well, luckily I've had the opportunity to kind of stay home most of the time after. My last clinic was cut short, so I'd say like 99.9% of my time has been spent at home. But I think just a few instances where it's directly affected me include one of my rotations was in Utah, where they cut the rotation short. And I was just taking a walk around the neighborhood, getting some fresh air one day. This was in March. And then there was just this group of Caucasian teenage boys. They were sitting in a field, and I was just minding my own business. And then like one of them started shouting something at me, and I could tell it was very hostile, and I didn't know what he was saying, but it was just kind of an uncomfortable situation. Like I was across the street from them, and it didn't look like they were going to attack me or anything, but I don't think, well, I mean, I've had homeless people shout at me, but I haven't really had anything like that happen, like from
was it like
mental situation.
Was it like the tone of the voice? Was it a facial expression?
Yeah.
How did you know this was different?
Well, it was a combination of all the above. Like I don't even know these people, and they looked, well, one of them looked angry, and like he was shouting in like an angry way. And I could tell like some of his friends were trying to like get him to stop. But just the fact that and I'm pretty sure it has to do with the pandemic, because nothing like this has happened to me before. So it was just something uncomfortable. I didn't feel like my life was threatened, but it could be, like, like they were teenagers, but they could gang up on me if they wanted to. And this is Utah. Like I gotta be honest, like all the people there are really nice that I've encountered. I didn't know what to expect going in, but everyone was really lovely. So just having that happen was really unsettling, and it was just very strange. And in terms of my fear from getting attacked, just comes from, I know most people are probably not racist, at least they won't overly be racist towards an Asian person. But like, even if there's a small minority who are willing to go out and attack us for just how we look, I've heard accounts of a Singaporean in, I think it was Portugal or some European country. He got beaten up by a group of white teenagers, or anyway, they weren't Asian, and they targeted him specifically for looking Chinese, but he wasn't even Chinese. So things like that, just I feel bad for all people who look Asian, because a lot of us, most of us we keep to ourselves, and we've been taught growing up to keep out of trouble, to not be confrontational, to not fight. And so I feel like that, paired with very aggressive, hostile people who are taking out their anger on us is a very bad combination. And a lot of us, I know my friends are great people. They're outstanding. They work hard. They're kind people to each other in the community, and they're hardworking. They're doctors and engineers, and they don't deserve. Nobody deserves getting beaten up for who they are. But I mean, especially not my friends. And I've heard stories of them just going out trying to go out as least as possible, and facing racism, like they're just calling them all sorts of slurs and making a scene in public, and just this is just not okay on so many levels. So I think a lot of my fear just comes from these firsthand accounts and seeing all these news articles come up with like women getting acid splashed on their face in New York. Like that is just not okay. So yeah, I guess that's where a lot of my apprehension comes from.
I think I took from your video is that you worked hard to get where you're at, and that you didn't have to go through most struggles most people have gone through. Like I said, one thing I did say that I saw in your video, you said you were privileged, and so a lot of stuff probably wouldn't relate to how your discrimination from being Asian doesn't compare to other people, but you do feel their pain, and you think that this whole I'm not the virus pertains not just to you because you didn't have to go through it, but other people too. And so it's not just, like you said, it's not just one person, it's everybody from Asian to blacks to Hispanic, it's everybody. So that's what I got you from your video, is that you talked about unity, but more specifically that it's happening now because of Asians, and that, you're working hard in your clinic, and, to me, that's inspirational for you to even come out to even say that, because a lot of people who go through discrimination, people are scared to speak out on it and to say, hey, like you said, it's a hate crime. Crime itself deserves punishment. A lot of people that we're seeing right now are not getting that punishment for it.
For sure. I think that's one thing about Asian culture that kind of makes this whole situation worse, because many of our cultures focus so much on saving face and like, oh, what your reputation is, and if you speak out, like, are you going to lose your job? Are you going to get in trouble? So I think that's holding back a lot of people. So it's really so important to just get your voice out there, because that's really your biggest weapon against all of this. And it's the most effective one too, because you're not harming anybody by saying what's going on. Well, I mean, as long as you're speaking in a, like a reasonable and I guess easy to perceive way. So I think more people should speak up about all sorts of inequalities and hate crimes, because if you don't tell anybody, then nothing's going to change. Nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to care. Mm-hmm.
And I think what makes me upset is that there are so many people who look, quote unquote, Chinese, but they're not even Chinese. They're like they're from Singapore. And then, I have a friend, she's Vietnamese. She's never been to Vietnam. She's never been anywhere across the country, but she was born in British Columbia. And
right.
And the thing about it is that she comes to America and people just call her Chinese, and like she asking if she speaks Vietnamese, and then, which is crazy, she even gets stereotyped against Vietnamese because she can't speak the language. And so that's just so much misconception about just judging people in general. But
exactly.
Definitely your video of unity basically inspired me to contact you. At first it was for research purposes, but then it was like, you know what? Because at first I was really against the subject because, I had, like you said, it's not a competition. And I was kind of in that mindset of the competition, of the competitor, because I'm like, you know what? I mean, what they're going through is what we go through daily. So why should I feel any kind of empathy for them? Not in a malicious way, but like, this is what we go through. This is our normal. So I mean, we shouldn't be shocked that this is going on right now, because that's just how people are, and we're just used to it.
Yeah.
And like you said in your video, it's not right.
First of all, I think it's really open-minded of you to invite me here, and I know it's not easy coming from your position, because I recognize there's a lot of systemic oppression against Black people. So I can kind of understand where you're coming from with the whole like, oh, we experience this every day thing. But I'm glad you're able to see it from our perspective as well. I think racism in general, of course, should not be allowed, but I've been seeing a lot of I made a video about how hate crimes should be stopped, and actually got a lot of like controversial comments and downvotes from people I'm pretty sure who haven't even watched the video. And a lot of comments like, oh, well, what about like the blacks facing discrimination in China, or Hispanics and blacks have been facing this forever. And I understand that racism does affect a lot of people, and sometimes to different degrees depending on who you are. But I just think that like this is my video specifically was saying stop hate crimes against Asians, and also hate crimes are bad in general. It's not a competition. So I don't get why there's like this hostility between races. In general, before all this happened, I've always been proactive against all sorts of racism, and I've always understood that intersectionality was a thing. And we all know like the long history of racism against blacks in America. So I don't want it to be a competition. Like it's just unnecessary. And I think if there's a problem, we should all speak up about it. But I don't think groups should be attacking each other about, oh, who has it worse, because that's not really what the problem is here. The problem is all of it is bad, and we all deserve to speak up about it if we feel strongly about a specific situation. It's not meant to be like, oh, like who has it worse, you know? And I also wanted to add, like with your friend being Vietnamese and like she's barely even Vietnamese, but she still gets stereotyped as Chinese. And to add to that, like, yeah, that's just one example of why you shouldn't be racist towards Asians for thinking they're Chinese. Even me, who's Chinese, I grew up in Canada. I'm not a communist. I disagree with the Chinese government. I feel like they shouldn't be killing people and all that. I think China's a great country. I'm still proud of my country. I'm proud of Chinese people, but I don't agree with some of the tactics the government does to carry out certain goals. So just because somebody looks Chinese doesn't mean they are a living, breathing version of the government. And sometimes people say, fuck China, like they don't understand how harmful that is.
Yeah.
It's not like they mean fuck the Chinese government, but some people say fuck China because they're lazy. But some people actually mean fuck China because in their mind, Chinese people and everyone who looks Chinese equals the Chinese government. And that is one of the most harmful and ignorant distinctions that you could just ignore.
If you have a message to the world, what would you say to them in regards to COVID discrimination against Asians?
Well, I think the message is pretty simple. Even if you have racist thoughts, just keep it to yourself and don't harm others by spreading nonsense, hate towards certain groups, and especially not physical violence, because that is not okay under any circumstance.
All right. Well, Emma, thank you so much. And hey, congratulations on school. It's very, very, very admirable to do, because I know that I did 6 years of college. I can't imagine what you're going through right now.
Well, that's still something to celebrate. Yeah, thank you so much for all the kind words.
Oh, no problem. All right. Well, Emma, take care and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Dr. Thompson, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Are you welcome? Yeah, and I just want to say thank you, like I said, personally, because you took time out of your busy schedule to talk to us today. So I want to thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. As I mentioned to you, many people helped me along the way, and this is an opportunity. I consider this an opportunity to pay it forward. Thank you.
All right. And if you don't mind, just tell people, give you a little bit of background about you and what you do.
So I'm Dr. Monique Thompson. I have a doctorate in health administration. I'm a licensed professional counselor, which means in Texas, you have to have a license to practice as a psychotherapist. And I've been licensed for 19 years. I'm also a licensed professional counselor supervisor. And in Texas, for you to get your license, you have to have supervision after you finish your degree and after you get your license. Someone has to supervise you. So I've supervised, I think, 14 now, interns to get their license. So that's what those credentials mean. I'm a faculty member with the University of Phoenix. I've been there for 11 years now. And I'm a consultant with Southern Methodist University Perkins School of Theology, and I've been there for 17 years now. I'll be in my 18th year this fall. So I'm in higher education, and I have a counseling practice. And my daughter and I started a nonprofit about 4 years ago called Whatsoever is Good, where we help students to get scholarships to go to college. And she herself has over $11 million in merit scholarships, and she's a graduating senior this spring.
Wow. Well, congratulations to the both of you. That's a lot. That's
yeah.
I thought, I'm over complaining about 6 years of school, and wow, I can't even imagine what you did. So big congratulations to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And once again, thank you so much for going on the show, because like I said, just hearing all that, you can imagine how busy you are. So we're going to get to it. At first, I want to start by asking, that there's a new line of discrimination going on because of COVID. And I'm not sure if you heard about the ongoing issue, which most people, like we talked about earlier in the show, that it hasn't been really brought to the forefront, but it's happening all over, is Asian discrimination because of COVID. And one thing that me and the guys that we talked about earlier was that it's not just in America, it's global. That these Asians, whether they're Chinese, Japanese, Filipino, that they're going through discrimination. They even just walk around with a mask in public. And I just want to know, what's the purpose of people getting paranoid and thinking that they have to be there's so discrimination towards these Asian people because of what's going on, and why? It's because it did originate in China. We are aware of that. Which it really hasn't been really set in stone where it came from in China, but the source came from China. But now people who look like of Asian descent are now getting attacked in the streets, definitely cyberbullied, and people are just paranoid to be around Asian people. And I know earlier I was telling Brandon that you can attest that we live in a multicultural area in Dallas. And I live in a city to where it's probably 80% Asian. And so I had my own paranoia, like you said, just going outside and being around my neighbors, because I know that some of my neighbors, they do travel a lot, out of the country. And so I had that same paranoia, but, what can you say about that?
So one of the courses that I teach at University of Phoenix is on corrections. And so I'm going to pull it from that angle, because I want to be careful that we don't mislabel this kind of racism, this kind of phobia, as simply a mental illness. Okay. However, there is some history there. In our country, there's history that far predates COVID of Asians in our country being severely mistreated. Other communities being marginalized and mistreated. If we look at, do other people have these thoughts? Do you and I have these thoughts? Part of my work earlier, before I had kids, was with adult male sex offenders. And in one evening in group, one of the guys asked me, so you telling me no one has these thoughts like we do? I'm going to take my responsibility seriously as a therapist. So for a question like that, I wanted to use caution. And I told him, let me think about it, let me research. So I did, and I always do. Look in the articles, look in the literature, see what we know. And I came back to him the next week with an academic answer, but it had lined up with my personal thoughts, right? So my answer to him was, yes, other people do have these same kinds of thoughts that you guys have. The difference is that we are repulsed instead of aroused. So when you're talking about like Asian Americans having these experiences, you might have, like you said, my neighbor's been traveling. Where did you go? Are you okay? You may have those thoughts, but you're not aroused by thoughts of violence, by thoughts of hurting that person without provocation, about thoughts of dehumanizing them. You're not aroused by those thoughts. You're likely repulsed by that, which helps you to exercise some self-regard and to be at least socially polite to that person, maintaining your social distance, but being human toward that person and seeing some line of connection between yourself. When you're aroused by harming someone who has not provoked you, the problem there is in your mind, where you are not allowing yourself to take a moment to remove your action from your thought. Now, I know it seems dark, but I am going to associate this the same as I would with a sex offender, because that is the treatment, which is we want them, if you have a thought, for you to pause and not take action, right?
Right.
Whenever we say we're releasing someone who's a sex offender back into the community, what we expect is no matter what kind of thoughts you're having, you will exercise restraint and keep from engaging in what? Action. Same thing here. Even if you are having thoughts about Asian Americans, you're having thoughts that they are a certain way, what we expect you to do as a community is exercise restraint. For some of us, it's not a problem. We're not actually exercising restraint. We're not having disturbing thoughts in the first place. So there is a body of literature that helps us to see that some people have disturbing thoughts about a certain group of people, and it provokes them to violence. There's also a body of literature that helps us to see that partly what's happening is this person has a superiority complex. They have decided that I am better and in charge of everyone else, and they feel some sense of parenting, or like I can control you by exercising these kind of acts. Both of these groups have in common is thoughts that are incorrect. We call them deviant thoughts. In forensic science, we would say they are criminal thinking errors. So that's what is really going on when we're looking at this as worldwide. Statistically, that's the same thing as any other crime. The problem is almost always the person who executed the action failed to use self-control.
And and thank you for that answer. I mean, because that makes a lot of sense. And I'm just breaking it down. Wow, I never thought it the way you put it that way. And now I'm putting myself in the shoes of someone for the sake of the show, like Asians who are going through that. Like, I mean, what do you think they can do to I know they can just probably distance themselves from people who think that way, but if they're walking on the street and they're practicing social distancing, and they're doing their due diligence, just practicing what's needed to happen, what can they do when they get attacked like this? Or
file a charge. So I can tell you that now.
Straight up,
it's a crime. File charges. Spitting on somebody is assault. Press charges. If you can record it, get a videotape of it so you have some evidence. If there are bystanders who saw it, get their names, telephone numbers, and contact information, and press charges. That is what you have to do. That is what you have to do.
And that's not just for Asians, that's for anybody.
Anybody. I would say yes, for anybody, definitely for anybody. You want to recover your power, right? And fortunately, in America, and I can't speak for the options in other countries, because even as I was doing a little bit of research for this, there were other places where this is happening, and the complaint is that the government is not doing enough. Well, actually, in America, we have existing laws on the books. Press charges. Get your evidence in the moment and press charge, and save that shirt that's got the DNA from them spitting on you. Save that shirt and take it to court and file your charges. And consider that sometimes even if you can't get a criminal penalty, you can get a civil penalty. Press both. Get both.
And for those out there listening who are younger and think that broadcasting what you do online, you can get harassment charges on social media too.
Exactly. But, you sure can. And you can. Save all the messages. Exactly. When they start cyberbullying you, save the whole thread.
Okay.
Save the whole thread and press charges.
Now, I do want to add a couple of things. Right now, there is a reporting center, Stop AAPI Hate, which was created by the Asian Pacific Policy and Planning Council and a lot of other great Asian businesses and communities creating this thing. It was started March 19th. Since then, and this report ended April 24th, there was almost 1,500 reports of coronavirus discrimination from Asian Americans reported. So that was almost 1,500 from March 19th to the 24th that was reported that they had some type of crime added to them. That's not to say this is just the ones that were reported. There is a lot seen where a lot of people will not report this type of stuff. Even with these resources, why do you think there's that hesitation toward that, reporting the crime?
All victims have hesitation. So I don't want to say it's just because somebody's Asian American. All victims have hesitation to report. All victims, well, I won't say all, a majority of victims have a hesitation to report and require some level of support to report a crime. I normally say my specialty is adult survivors of sexual trauma. What I say about people who have been victimized by crimes is that they want the same justice that everybody else wants, which is for it to have never happened in the first place. Right. So when you are someone who was just walking down the street, which one of the reports, the lady was on her way to the gym, and some random person just started talking crazy to her and then spit on her. And she made it to the gym and just sat down and cried. That is a typical reaction, is to want to get away from the person or the situation. You want it to just stop. However, one of the things to do to get your power back is to take some kind of action that brings you a sense of control. Now, as an adult, you have no responsibility to anybody except yourself. If you choose not to report, then that's something that you can choose to do. But if you've experienced that, to avoid resulting trauma, and by now I mean psychological trauma, I do heavily recommend that you talk to someone. Even if you don't report the crime, still talk to someone. So like the reporting site that you have, that's like one step to kind of get a sense of power back. But this actually is a space where I would say a professional counselor would be where I would start, because anything like that can provoke trauma symptoms, which we can get nipped in the bud. If you go see someone quickly, you can get a lot of trauma symptoms nipped in the bud before they become post-traumatic stress disorder or something like that. But reporting the crime can be difficult to do for anybody.
And I kind of want to go back to what you said in the beginning. The first thing you said, where you said this is very similar to, sex crimes. Right now, a lot of crimes taking place are being called hate crimes. And me doing my research, a lot of psychologists don't see hate crimes as true hate crimes. They say it's more leading toward fear, ignorance, and anger usually end up being the true source of them doing these type of crimes. Can you kind of get into like? And
then they found a space, a population to direct those feelings toward. That's the same. That's what I'm saying. We break this down to corrections, down to crime. We know what the criminal thinking pattern looks like for any crime. This is another crime, but it's still in the core a cycle of criminal thinking. A criminal thinking pattern means that my thoughts about doing something, I am doing nothing about them. I'm just letting my brain run wild. I'm planning to do what I want to do by not planning not to, right? So part of it is that some of us may have unsettled feelings about a certain group of people, but we might even use the access to the internet to explore that, see what's going on, to talk to somebody about it, to say, I noticed, Jane Elliott, she did the first, one highly publicized experiment, Brown Eye, Blue Eyes, where right after Martin Luther King's assassination, she split her classroom into two groups, two students with brown eyes, students with blue eyes. The first day, all the blue-eyed kids got all the privileges in the world they wanted, and the brown-eyed kids were made to feel like the bottom of somebody's shoe. You would think, because this was after she had explained to them what Martin Luther King stood for and how it was so wrong what had happened, you would think that the next day when the shoe was on the other foot that they would act like they had some sense. Oh, but no. The minute they got power, they treated the kids who had mistreated them the same way. Wow. Right. So we know already that a lot of this is mental, as far as you not choosing a different way to think. It is not a mental illness per se, more about you choosing not to control your behavior, you being angry, frustrated, and taking it out on somebody else. We saw that with her experiment, and there are other places where students can learn about this. I don't know if you guys have heard of Anytown USA. Anytown USA is a summer camp for kids to learn racial tolerance. Well, actually learn tolerance, period. So they bring in lots of different ethnicities, religious backgrounds, gender, help people to have some tolerance for people who are different from you. And so all week long, students go through this experience, and at the end of the week, they give them an opportunity to show what they learned, basically. And every time it's the same song, second verse of, you think that they would be tolerant, and they are not. So you're right that it is something you have to experience and choose. You have to make a choice, an active choice.
And thank you so much for saying that, because that's kind of how I look at it, because I think that with the camp, I think adults need that too. But it's great that it's happening for kids, because I mean, I grew up, I went to a majority white school, and I grew up with people that I thought considered my brothers, you know, and just after college, these friends just turned very racial. And I'm just like, you know, what happened? Like, and I think that, and I told Brandon this, and I don't know if we had a disagreement on this or not, but I really think that in a way, that racism itself is just a trend. Like, well, I don't really feel this way, but because person B and C feel this way, I'm going to just join them and feel this way too.
Yeah. Just failing to think your own thoughts. I mean, that's to some degree how gang rapes happen. When we look back on lynchings, where people participated in it and just were not thinking for themselves, but also some of it was that you thought your thoughts were right. And right? You thought your thoughts were right. They were wrong the whole time. The whole time they were wrong, but you thought your thoughts were right. When you have people who are unchecked in their power, the whole Nazi concentration camps did not happen just because some one person had that idea. It was a long, big group of people who no one checked their ideas. No one made them stop. So something like this, you have to use some power and make it stop. You have to make it stop. If this happens to you, it's happening to someone else. And so you pressing charges against this person is not just protecting you, it's also keeping them from doing this to someone else. You have to take a step. We've learned that time and time again in humanity. You cannot, and the turning of the cheek does not really mean don't press charges. That's not what it means.
And I'm sorry, Brandon.
I was going to say, I want to touch back on what you were saying about the camp that children go to, where during my research, I saw that is one of the biggest ways to prevent this type of crimes from happening, because a lot of this comes from not understanding, I'm just going to say, Asian individual, like using Calvin's case, his friends knew him, but they did not know the African American culture. And I'm not just talking about music. You know, they don't know the actual culture behind, you know, who we are. So when it comes to when they left, when they didn't see Calvin anymore, they had more interaction, probably negative interactions with, you know, more African Americans, or his or her friends had negative interactions with African Americans. And that kind of soaks up like, man, Calvin wasn't like that, but I mean, these people, you know, these seems like the type of people I want to hang around with. And therefore Calvin is not putting that into a group of, you're one of them, and I have to protect my space. I have to protect my place in this world. Right.
And I think, you know, one of the questions was like, do I feel like the social media is affecting how we subconsciously experience things? Yes, definitely.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, definitely. On the one hand. On the other hand, we're looking at things that affect us subconsciously. As a therapist, I can tell you that on the one hand, that is true, but the other part of the truth is that you could know. You could know. It is not true that you just are a robot, you know, interacting with the world unaware of what you're doing. That's not true. So on the one hand, it's true that things are subconsciously affecting you, influencing your decisions. But the other part of the truth is that you can pause. And I'll tell you, there are two ways, and they're not magic pills. This is not a Disney answer, but these are two things you can do to improve your ability to think for yourself. One is meditation, and that's science, right? 11 minutes of meditation a day helps you to be able to think, all right? The other one is the practice of mindfulness, which is a little bit like meditation, but is a step on managing your experience throughout the day. You choosing to have your brain in a place where it will listen to you, that's something that you can train your brain to do. If you allow yourself to be very good at being anxious, being very good at being a bigot, being very good at being racist, you're going to be an expert at it. But you can choose to learn. Your brain is capable of learning throughout your lifespan. So at this point, when we're looking at adults, we're looking at a choice not to learn. We're looking at a choice not to be connected to other humans. All of these are choices. The challenge is, when do you decide that you're going to be something different? And sometimes for some people, I'm not saying for everybody, but some people require a jail sentence. Some people require some prison time. You know, some of us just need your mama to say, you know, that was wrong. You know, some of us need a friend to say, dude, you was rude. You know, some of us just need that. Some of us just need somebody to be looking at us funny, like, you know, you changed your whole tone when that guy came over here.
Right.
You know, and all we need is somebody to raise our self-awareness. But other people need handcuffs and, you know, a judge. And so that's the theory of corrections, is deterrence. Some people are not going to stop because you tell them to.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Okay.
And very, very just stubborn in many ways. And it's not until they, you know, hit those bump in the roads, even jail time, or probably lose a limb here and there.
Right.
That they're like, well, I'm crippled now.
I'm crippled now, right.
Now I'm even less than what I thought I was when I was on top.
Right. Y'all realize that the least risk sex offender is one that is over the age of 70, and it's because they have decreased sexual arousal and they have decreased physical capacity to get opportunity with the victim. Wow. It's not actually because they changed their mind.
Man, I had a teacher like that. They caught him on the boardwalk.
Wow.
Exactly.
You know, Brandon, every time I talk to you, you just throw me for a loop.
He threw that in there, didn't he? I was like, dang, Brandon.
But no, we love it. And we love this conversation. I'm glad that we're having this conversation because it's one, I'm learning a lot right now. And one of the things, and Lee's not here right for the segment, but one of the things that he said that I think I kind of agree with him with, and I'm throwing this, adding a little bit more to this. I think, and we all know that history repeats itself. And I think that there was a point in time, especially in our country, that we did have a strong discrimination towards Asians, which was during the Pearl Harbor days, where we had Japanese concentration camps. And then, you know, then after that, it turned to civil. And then, you know, and after that, then, you know, Lee said that, you know, he believes that COVID is going to be the new way how 9/11 was for Middle Easterners, because, you know, how many people, you know, they name a Middle Eastern and say, well, what you doing, Osama? Or they just associate every Middle Easterner you see as Osama, and, you know, or a Muhammad. And it's just like, you know, that's not right. And so his biggest belief is that, you know, the way that people are treating Asians right now is that when they think about COVID, they're going to just call, you know, hey, what's up, COVID? And it's kind of, you know, have the same discrimination they did on Middle Easterns during 9/11.
That's such a power play, though. I just want to be clear that if someone is saying something like that, it's such a power play, because the other person, you know, you're saying that to me because you feel somehow like your life don't depend on you talking like you have some respect to me. A little bit of that is going on, okay? A little bit of that is going on. Then the other part of it is, well, if I have two friends, one of who is saying things like this, am I, by my silence, condoning it?
Right.
You know, am I, by my silence, condoning it? And then taking it one more step further, if we're saying that social media can influence, which it does, then social media can use its powers for good and influence social change toward tolerance and towards us creating a place where you calling someone COVID is not well represented. We don't embrace that. We shun that. We have to create the opposite level of power, where you who want to do that feel disenfranchised instead of it being the other way around. So that means that everybody who has the power to take a stand actually has to. You don't really have the option to remain silent. That's what's going on right now. That's what happened during the civil rights movement. That's what happened during suffrage. That's what's happened every time there has had to be a major change, is that everybody has finally had to just stand up together. It does not work one person at a time. That does not work. Everybody has to be one voice, one strong fist. That's how we make it through. That is literally what's going to happen. And you're right. It's probably going to be, these little nitpicky things people say, little cyberbullying. Well, as soon as you see the thread, instead of ha, 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 he, fight back at him. I saw this. It was funny, but not funny. This little boy did something on Twitter. His mama had kind of encouraged him to do it. And quote unquote, Black Twitter lit him up.
Wow.
Okay. And there was a video of him crying. He said, Mama, it's all your fault. Now Black Twitter got me. And I was like, yeah, you need to get got. That's what I'm saying, is that when you have that kind of behavior, everybody can't sit around and go, ooh, did you see that? Or, oh my God, I can't believe that. You need to be socially disciplined. If you think about the playground, which I like the playground, my office faces a playground. And I waited for it because I like playground justice. Playground justice, you do this, I discipline you, and then we go to shared lunch together after this. That's how I like for us to handle these.
Okay.
The situation after COVID, which I don't know if there'll be an after COVID. COVID is more like an ice age than a new normal. So I don't know what this looks like later. But as we see things that we think are not socially appropriate, when we see racism, you're standing by somebody that's, y'all have seen the videos where somebody is literally doing something to a person and people are videotaping it.
Right.
Instead of intervening.
Right.
My sister is a homicide detective. One of the problems is people sending the videotape in instead of intervening.
And like I said, working in the news, we know that's a crime too. You will be charged as accessory.
Thank you. So yeah, part of it is, you're right, this is going to continue, but our choice, everybody's choice, is what are you choosing to do, like in the light of day, May 2nd, what are you choosing to do in the light of day that if you see it going down, if you see it happening, will there be hell to pay because you happen to be there?
No,
it kind of
trust me. I'm sorry.
It kind of goes into self-reflection, and what you said earlier also, I think this kind of goes into it. I'm going to use myself as an example. I am often put in situations to where things unfairly happen to me. The average African-American person would say, I didn't get this because I'm Black. Mm. I try not to do that. I always try not to do that. I often see it might be because I'm not, one, good enough. Two, the higher power said, I do not need that right now, which that tends to be the reason why when I think back at it all the time. Three, it just might have been a situation. Me thinking like that, do you think that is a good practice for people right now in this type of situation? Where it's like, I know COVID came from China, but is this person really Chinese? Is this person?
Or even if they are, then so.
Yeah, exactly. So like, you have to stop, like you said in the beginning, think about what are the alternatives. What could actually be happening here instead of thinking straight to this negative feeling. Is that do you think a good practice for people?
That's an evidence-based practice. That is part of the evidence-based approaches that are being used in prison systems right now, so that people are ready for community corrections before they leave prison. One of the evidence-based practices is cognitive behavioral treatment, meaning helping the person stop a thought that's irrational, correct it, think a different thought, so that the action makes sense. That is an evidence-based practice for people who are in prison. So certainly those who are about to commit a criminal act should pause, think a different thought, take action off the rational thought. So when you're thinking irrational, you just don't do anything. Wait until you just edit that thought until it's edited down to a rational thought. And while it's irrational, just do nothing.
But often when you think like that, people will say that you're seen as, oh, you're just blind. You're just, you just soft whatever. By your own community, they'll tell you that, and they'll try to get you on that side. That kind of goes into that, thinking for yourself. What can people do to kind of defeat that, have the courage to do that?
To break that traditional,
break the traditional outlook of things, mindset.
What would it look like for you? I'm going to ask you, what does it look like for you?
Let's say I didn't get this client that I work for, that I know my quality is way better, but they went with somebody else.
Okay.
Somebody might say, oh, well, you're black. They don't want to work with a black filmmaker. They don't want to work with, somebody, of your color. Where I say, well, you could at least say I'm young. It's because I'm young. But it might also because, and this is what I've learned, it might be because, one, I don't market myself enough. Or two, it might be because my prices are technically higher than the other person. He might actually do it for free.
You already did it.
Yeah. But it's not, believe it or not, I find it hard for people to do that.
Yes, it is hard for people. No, it is hard for people to do that. It is hard for any person to do that. Can it be done? Yes. Is it hard to do? Also, yes. You're in a position where there's a big enough carrot. Like, you can see that I have to push through these thoughts so that I can achieve this other goal, which is to be successful in my field. If I allow myself to think that way, that the reason is because I'm black, well, I'm going to keep being black. So is there any reason for me to pursue this career? No. Or you could say to yourself, well, there possibly are some workarounds. I could try my marketing. I can try to figure out, the things I can do something about, let me do something about those things, because even if it's true that some of it is because I'm black, then it doesn't mean I have to relegate myself to a life that would dictate. I want this. And so you've got something you really, really want that helps you to have the motivation to work through those thoughts. But there may be other areas of your life where there's no real carrot and you let yourself have, lazy thinking, and you're like, I get around to that one day. And it's just not a carrot there to get you to start changing the way you think about it. Even in my field, as I came into the field, I always wanted to be an extra good therapist. I wanted people to come to me and get better. I didn't want people to come to me and it just be okay. So I dedicated my work to being the very best that someone will get when they come to see me. It's very, very excruciating hard. I wouldn't wish my internship on anybody. But I mean, even my own interns, and all of them have cried, but I don't want anybody to have my internship. My internship almost broke me, and I'm strong. But I wanted what the result would be. So I'm a good diagnostician. I know how to treat anything that would come my way. I prefer not to treat certain things, but if it happened to be that somebody came in and they had some, I would know what to do. And I always wanted to be able to do that. So that carrot was big enough for me to push through everything. And I'm older now. I'm 19 years in, so I'm old now. But even for my field, I'm still young and I'm still different. I'm a Black female, and I'm a Black female faith-based counselor. I have complex specialties, adult survivors of sexual trauma, couples recovery from affairs. Things are not easy to treat, and I enjoy that work, and I do it well, but it requires me to be on it, and I enjoy that. So that carrot keeps me pushing my brain to work. So in your case, you happen to really want to do what you really want to do well, which I don't know if you know, that probably means it's going to happen. Right. What you're wanting to have happen, the chances are more likely than not that they're going to happen. It's actually a predictor of survival. Optimism, like what you just described, is a predictor of survival. So you'll likely get it. But the carrot is kind of nice. I mean, plus you actually get to get more cash. I myself appreciate that too. I don't work for free. I'm leaving that. So. It's like, it's my religion.
I love it. Hey, that's the name of the show is called Straight Up. So I mean, that you're being straight up, and I love it. And then we don't want to keep you too long, but I have to just end with this and ask you, how do you feel about this whole thing? Like just the whole COVID and everything going on in the world right now. Like, what's your final intake on everything? And like, what do you see the line? I know you said you really can't tell, but because it's the ice thing. But what do you think the long-term impact would be just because of COVID? Period.
People are gonna watch their no. No, I think that you guys are onto something with identifying a group that's being specifically marginalized in the wake of this. And so part of what I hope will happen is that our humanity is better post-pandemic. I hope that we are better. But we are humans and we don't always get better. So I would say that unfortunately, I'm a scientist, so some of my opinion is that it is not likely. Our probability is low without effort. Humans, we don't really do well with chance. So if we have a voice of leadership, that a community leadership that says we are going to be our best selves, then that statistically suggests that we'll get there. If we continue to have the kind of leadership that we've had through this so far, I do not see things as far as the humanistic part of it. I do not see that getting better. Unfortunately, that may get worse. And that's what we've seen so far. I don't know if y'all done probably in your research for it, you've seen that it is actually for Asian Americans, it has gotten worse because of the lack of leadership from our elected leaders. It has gotten worse for their population. So unless we see a change there, unfortunately, my opinion is that we will see a downturn in the quality of life that we are experiencing. On the other hand, will humans survive? Yeah, that's why we still walk on earth right now. We don't have claws and teeth to destroy. We will figure out a way to survive, but is surviving something the same as quality? No, it is not.
Wow, that was heavy.
Yeah,
I like that too. And with that being said, just want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. I was going to tell you this post recording, but like the whole time you were speaking, learning a lot from you, I'm grinning ear to ear because like you can hear stuff on TV, and trust me, Brandon and I can attest because we work in media. He works in media. Albert used to work in media, and we know what goes on and what we hear and stuff like that. But just to hear, like even right now with my friends who are doctors, hearing it from the mouth, the source of the mouth, it makes me feel more optimistic. I feel like, what, everything's going to be okay. And just to hear you today, it gives me so much positivity that the world is different, and we have to look out for everybody and not just, whites, blacks, Latinos. We have to look out for everybody because, like you said, in order to beat this, we have to work together. And isolating one race is not going to make things better, because as much as we want to isolate and discriminate, those want to isolate. I mean, just think about, it came from China, but so does your clothes, so does your shoes. So if you want to hate on that, these people, we all contribute to the world. And something may have happened in China, but that doesn't mean they represent of what happened, because Brandon can commit a crime tomorrow, but his crime doesn't define who I am. So definitely want to thank you so much for breaking it down, giving us definitely mental exercises that we can look to and kind of break down what people are thinking with this. So definitely thank you for calling. And before you leave, I want to give you an invitation to come back if you want. If you want to come back, talk to us.
I like y'all. Y'all cool people.
And I'm not gonna
I like that straight up thing. I saw the thing. I'm like, they straight up. We can do this thing.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, like even being like in media doing interviews, this has probably been the best interviews I've ever done my whole life.
because
Thank
you're a professional and you're doing what the show is about, keeping it straight up. And I just love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Brandon, you got
Well,
anything
I
else?
appreciated the time to be on the show. You guys, I'll come anytime y'all ask.
Yeah. Go on and give your what your business.
Oh, yes, y'all. If anybody wants to reach out to me, my website is northdallascounselor.com. North like the direction, Dallas like the city, and counselor.com. Dr. Monique Thompson. And if you need any help, reach out. I'd love to see what I can do. I definitely, for these guys, they can call me anytime. I'm really and truly, I owe a debt of gratitude to many, many professionals who helped me along the way in my career. A list of icons who helped me along and helped me to get where I am. So if you guys are listening to Straight Up and you liked it, please, my practice is fine. Y'all can come to my website. My practice is fine. Dr. Thompson has a long wait list. I ain't got no space for no new people right now. But listen, y'all listen in to Straight Up and support this podcast, because I listened in before I came on the show. I liked what I heard. They're really focusing on keeping things real and being real with you, and I like that approach. So you guys support this podcast.
Thank you so much. And definitely, if you're in the DFW area, or if you want to email her, reach out to her, because some professionals won't tell you the truth or keep it real with you. So definitely I can just talk to her and just feel that I'm comfortable. I can talk to you. So thank you for just keeping it straight up. And that's one rule of the show. You have to be straight up, and you definitely obeyed their rule and with grace. And so thank you, Dr. Thompson, for coming on the show, and thank you for keeping it straight up.
All right, y'all take care. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you.
Wow, man, Brandon, that was pretty powerful, man. I didn't think that going into this. I mean, I'm 30 years old and I still have a lot to learn. And doing these interviews has really taught me a lot. And I'm not just saying that I'm being arrogant, but I'm 30 years old and I've been through a lot in 30 years. And I'm still learning. I'm still learning to educate myself when it comes to other people's problems and stuff like that. I mean, what did you learn?
I definitely learned a lot. Dr. Monique Thompson definitely hit some areas that I didn't think she would go. Connecting the mentality of even predators and kind of just comparing it to what some people are feeling against the Asian communities. And Emma, she definitely had a great way of thinking in terms of how we need to slow down and stop comparing, like, who is getting the hate more than others.
Like you said, it's not a competition. And so, that struck home for me too.
Now, the biggest thing here is that, like, you took the time to learn, like, sit and listen. And I think we both agree now, like, that's what even 50-year-olds, like 60-year-olds, like, there's no time in our life where we need to say, okay, we learned everything. We don't need to learn about other people's cultures. We don't need to know, like, how this country, does one thing. The more we know, the more we understand, and the more we can actually get along with our neighbors. And I do mean, like, the communities that we're connected with.
And I'm all for embracing different cultures, and just to know that this kind of discrimination doesn't just go on in America, but from Canada to Singapore to Vietnam and you're thinking about, like, we're in America and we all contribute different cultures, which makes this country great. And I can probably be wrong here statistically, but I mean, the Asians make a heavy impact in our country. There's so many items that you hear that are made in China. I mean, I know there was one report that somebody tried to go to college, and for a project, they went without making African American for Black History Month. They went without using African American made products in their homes, and it was a difficult assignment for them because we contributed so much to this country, and so we have to look like this is a giant melting pot, and we have to do just such that. And I don't know about you, but we're hearing Dr. Thompson when she talked to us. It made me do a lot of self-reflection, not just because of Asian discrimination and what they go through, the lack of understanding what they go through, but just self-understanding what I'm supposed to perceive things. And so she really did help me out with that. And I hope she all helped you out there. I know she helped you, Brandon, for sure. But we hope that she helped you all out there. And we want to thank you so much for joining us today at Straight Up Show. We want to continue the conversation. If you can make sure you follow us on all our social media platforms. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at Straight Up Show. On Twitter, Straight Up Plus Show. And on YouTube at Straight Up Show. If you want to be more specific, Straight Up Show Shreveport. You can find all of our content. But until then, make sure you always stay straight up. Have a good one.
We want to thank you for tuning in to our episode. While producing and interviewing for this episode, an update on another tragedy just occurred.
As most of you have heard and seen, 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery was shot and killed while jogging by two individuals who claimed that he was a suspect that had been breaking into homes in the neighborhood. It wasn't at night. He wasn't wearing a dark hoodie, but just jogging. The problem? Ahmaud was African American, and his killers, white.
It's tragedies like this is why we produce shows like the ones we did today. Not every Asian has COVID or is Chinese. Not every African American is a suspect. And every white person is not racist.
Now, many of you counter-argue that we should be silent about what happened to Ahmaud because when it happens to someone who's not a minority, it's not as publicized. Something interesting that our guest Emma said. It's not a competition. Discrimination and racism affects us all. So for those of you who see it as a published competition on these issues, well, minorities are in first place and the majority needs to catch up.
Sounds ignorant, right? Well, so does judging and mistreating others who look different from you. So we leave you with a couple of questions.
What will you do? Will you remain silent on these injustices plaguing the world? Or will you join us and speak out on what's right?
What will you do?